Welcome, Compass Youth. We are so excited that today is the first day of our Compass grade 6, 7, and 8 learning lesson. We are so excited to have you here, and we are very ready to share some information about Martin Luther with you. As you know, this is Compass, which is the new rebranded version of Confirmation. So anything that you see with our Compass logo on it will be a part of our Confirmation program. And we have the compass because it is direction for discipleship. So we want you to join us on this journey as we take a great adventure. Just a couple of reminders. Remember that after you watch all of these video modules, there will be an application at the end of it. Make sure you click on that, you learn about it, you do the required assignment, if you will, and you upload it to us so that we can see how you applied the information that you learned. Also, remember that this month, if it works for you to participate in an elective, that you head on over to the website or the link that I sent to your grown-ups and click on that and get signed up. If this month doesn't work for you, that's okay. There will be new electives coming in November.
Hey there, Compass kids. Welcome again to our first lesson here on Seesaw. For those of you who weren't able to make it to our orientation last week, I'm Tom Westcott, and I'm the new CYF pastor here at Trinity, and I thought it'd be a great way to start our year together in the sanctuary where we usually would be. So a few things about myself. I have a wife. Her name is Emily. She is a teacher in Chippewa Falls. I have two kids. Olive is about 3.5, almost 4, and Rowan is about 1.5 years, and they are very busy kids. So I hope you get to see them in the near future. I love fishing. I love all things barbecue. I worked at a Famous Dave's in high school through seminary, and so I think I have barbecue sauce in my DNA. So that's a little bit about me. But this week, we are going to talk about one of my favorite topics for confirmation, and that's Martin Luther. Now, Luther is why we're Lutherans, and so he started, or kind of lit the flame, if you will, to the fire that was the Reformation. It was a movement that spread across Europe and the world, and Luther struggled with this idea that God was an angry judge who wanted perfection. We could never be perfect. But then he discovered that God is not this angry judge. God is loving, and God gives us that free gift of grace. And so forgiveness and mercy is nothing to be earned, but it's something God gives us. So let's dive deeper into this topic, or at least this first part of Luther's journey, with a prayer. Gracious God, thank you so much for gathering us in this digital space. Whether we're at home, in the car, wherever we might be, help us to center and focus on you right now and to what you're calling us to be, who you're calling us to be as modern-day reformers, as peacemakers like our Noah's Ark preschoolers are. In your name we pray. Amen. Check out the next video. So before we talk about Martin Luther, I think it's important to talk about what's going on, big scope, if you will, historically in Martin Luther's time. So you might be wondering, just when was Martin Luther around? Well, he was around about 500 plus years ago. And so do you remember that old rhyme? It goes, in 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue.
I see land!
Yeah, Columbus discovered America. He thought he was going to India, but instead he landed in America. And Columbus wasn't a pirate, but he was a jerk. We can talk about that at a different time. So Columbus sailed across the oceans. That was the first big thing that happened during Luther's life. But there was also a lot of new scientific development. And one of them was the idea that the sun was not, or Earth was not the center of the universe. So they were looking at the stars right there. Yeah. And they were thinking about how the sun was the center of the universe and not Earth, which was a total radical idea. So people were not too happy with that sort of change. There was also the plague, a different sort of pandemic, one that was much deadlier. And lots of people died. Lots of people, like huge fractions of the European continent. But there was also a technological development. It was called the printing press. Now, can you imagine handwriting everything? Ugh, gross, right? So they would put letters into a press and essentially stamp it onto paper so they could create lots and lots of pages of paper at one time, just like Ashley's doing, stamping whole pages instead of handwriting them out. Pretty cool, right? Yeah. So later in Luther's life, he was able to translate the New Testament into German, and so they could get that spread around the world. In fact, before Luther died, he was able to see the millionth copy of the New Testament translated into German published. Pretty sweet, right? But there was also lots of fighting and wondering. Luther's day and age was really weird, man. Like, wow, I just got beat up with a foam noodle. A piece of insulation boat just sailed across the ocean. Big things were happening when Luther was around. But let's talk about what the church was like back then. So as I mentioned earlier, the world was changing for Martin Luther and his contemporaries, and the church was not far behind. You see, people started to question things and wonder, what's really going on? So back then, there were two parts of the church. There was the Eastern Orthodox Church and the Western Church, which was Catholicism. And we come out of that tradition, out of that Western Church tradition, that is. So back then, the church was controlled by the Pope. Now, the Pope not only had lots of power in the church, but political power as well. The Pope controlled who was the ruler and who was the king in certain areas. The Pope, you didn't want to make mad, for sure. So what do you think happened if you were to go against the church or to upset the status quo? Well, if you guessed silenced, you're correct. If you guessed imprisoned, you're correct as well. But if you guessed burned at the stake, you might be correct as well. You see, the church didn't want to go through any change. The church was just happy the way things were. This was the world Luther grew up in. This was the world he knew. Outside in technology and exploration, things were always evolving and changing. And in the church resisted any change. The church didn't want to change for this new world. There was that tension. And he had that in his own life too. He had questions and wonderment, but the church said, no, you don't do that. The church almost says, no, you can't be like Thomas in the Gospel of John, who had some questions and wondering about Jesus and the resurrection. So it's no wonder that Luther had this idea that God was a stern judge who wanted nothing to change. And yet this stern judge of a God demanded perfection when humanity was flawed and imperfect. Luther couldn't reconcile the two, and so he struggled with that. But let's go back into Luther's life when he was first born. So Luther was born in 1483 to his parents, Margaret and Hans. He was born in the town of Eisleben, Germany. Now, they had started out as farmers, but they had accumulated enough money and resources that they bought a copper mine. So Luther grew up in this family that managed and worked in copper mines. Now, at the ripe age of 4, I have a 3.5-year-old. I don't know how you could figure this out for a 4-year-old, but Luther's parents figured out he's really smart. Let's send him to Latin school. Are you kidding? Latin school at 4 years old, he was going to start to learn another language. Probably a good idea if you're going to learn another language, but holy buckets. They put a lot of investment into Luther. In fact, he was the favorite son. So he did that, and they did that with the hopes of him becoming a lawyer. because lawyers at the time had indeed lots of power and influence in local economics and government. So they thought, we'll own the coppermine. He can help us out in judicial matters, but also lawyers made a good little chunk of change back then too. So they thought when they're older, he could take care of them financially. So Luther was set up for success as his parents thought best. But despite being the favorite son, Luther grew up in a very strict household. In fact, such a strict household, I would say Child and Human Services would have paid their house a visit. He writes later in his life about a time when he took a nut, a peanut, a cashew, an almond, something like that from the pantry at his house. And his mom got so mad that she hit him until he was bloody. Like, that's child abuse. So Luther grew up in a really strange and strict household for sure. So paired with, again, this view of his parents and the church and the world, that view of God being a stern and strict judge demanding perfection, makes a whole lot of sense, right? That's how he understood it. But I want to ask you this. How do you view God? What are some of your adjectives or metaphors for how you talk about God? Is God a creator, a redeemer, a sustainer? Is God a feeling, a warm feeling? Is God that sense of epiphany? How do you describe God? Now, there is no real wrong way to think about God, but when we think about God, we have to remember that they are just fragments of how we experience God's presence in our life. So when Luther experienced God as a divine, stern judge, perhaps it's the part that, yes, God has certain standards and desires for us and how to live, but God is not this divine being that's going to send us to hell if we don't do X, Y, and Z. So let's think about now how Luther's transformation and how he thought about God begun. So we're going to hear about Luther's first aha moment, if you will. And so as we do that, I want you to just center yourself, either look at this candle or close your eyes. And as Ashley reads this narrative version of one of Luther's big, profound experiences in his life, think about how you've experienced God in your life.
Imagine traveling back in time to medieval days. Imagine flying over Europe down into the forests of Germany. The sky is black with clouds as you descend. Rain drenches you as you settle onto the ground. A muddy road appears, and a lone horse-drawn wagon is making its way through the muck. Suddenly, you are sitting on the wagon seat, rain pouring all around. Your clothes smell wet and musty. Your skin is cold and clammy. Next to you sits a young man, maybe 20 years old. He is drenched, cold, and very frightened. He whispers prayers, muttering. Suddenly, boom, boom! A lightning bolt cracks with the deafening noise in the tree right next to the cart. The horse bolts. You are thrown from the wagon into the mud. Boom! Another blast explodes into a nearby tree. You dive for cover behind a rock wall. The young man cries out in fear, "St. Anne, spare me!" Boom! Another flash hits a nearby tree. Splinters flying everywhere. The branches burst into flames. Your nostrils fill with the bitter smoke and your hair with ashes. Howling winds rip at your clothing. Again, the man cries out, "St. Anne, spare my life! Only spare my life, and I will devote it entirely to God. I will become a monk." You know this man. It is young Martin Luther. The storm has caught him, and you are with him. He now cries to God, bargaining for his life. You push yourself into the stone wall, sensing panic in his eyes. A storm rages in his soul, even as the storm rages around you? Will it never end? Then, as quickly as it came upon you, the winds die down and the rain stops. Inky clouds give way to the brilliant sun breaking through, drenching the land with warmth. The young man relaxes and leans his head against the stone wall. Together, you heave a sigh of relief. The arch of a grand rainbow stretches across the afternoon countryside in front of you. You stand and stretch the kinks of fear from your tense muscles. You brush debris from wet hair and clothing. A few years from now, Martin Luther will write about this day as the pivotal day of his life, the day God got hold of him. Later, he will translate the entire Bible, inspire generations of Christians with his writing, and launch the greatest Reformation in the history of the church.
So, after that storm, Luther kept good on his promise. On July 17th, 1505, Luther made vows and joined a monastery. So he made certain vows, and those vows were of celibacy, poverty, and also, piety. Luther made those three promises: poverty, celibacy, and piety. Now, how do you think his parents reacted when they had groomed him to make money and to gain power and to be the best son that they could have ever imagined? They were disappointed. They lost that inheritance they had banked on. They lost that influence, really, because he was just going to be a monk or a priest. They were not too happy at all. But Luther, as he joined this monastery, still had that yearning that he needed to do his best, and he was going to be the best monk possible, and he was going to earn God's grace no matter what. He was going to earn that love of God no matter what it took. So he did all the dirty work there. He outprayed people. He out-Bible studied other monks. He outdid everyone. But that didn't make him feel any better. He knew that no matter what he did, he just couldn't earn God's love. And so he had that storm that was quelled way back when rage back within himself. He called that time, the German word is Anfechtung, which has no English translation, but it's that turmoil within oneself, where one just feels like there is a war, and you're just being torn apart. Luther was not a happy guy. So 4 years later, in 1509, Luther becomes a priest. He becomes a priest, especially in one particular place, and that is at the University of Wittenberg. So Luther is charged with not only being a priest and caring to a congregation, but he's also charged with teaching the students at the university. So he taught subjects like the book of Psalms and the book of Romans. But he was charged by this group to go to Rome, to go to where the Pope lived, and to represent the church for just a day or two. But it was a long journey. And when he was there, he really didn't find what he thought he was looking for. He thought that going to Rome would be this holy experience and that he would have this storm within subside. But what he found was a lot of corruption and a lot of debauchery and all this sort of immoral living that Luther took vows to not do, but they were being committed by priests and monks there in Rome. So he left Rome feeling like the church there in Rome was just a big hypocrite. And how could they be living that way when they took these vows? And all of these places with various saints' relics, like a bone fragment or a piece of fabric that they wore, they were really just tourist traps to get money. And then there were people selling indulgences. Luther just didn't get it. You can't buy God's grace. You can't go to all these sites and earn it. Luther went back to Germany a little disillusioned with the church, and that storm that he thought was going to go away kept raging. So for the next 3 years after Luther got back from Rome, he struggled to be a professor and a priest. Again, he was supposed to be teaching about God's love and how to be a good Christian, and yet he struggled with how to do that himself. But one night, when he was preparing for class, he was reading the book of Romans, and I believe the book of Hosea as well, and he stumbled onto a passage, and it was that aha moment for him. He talked about that St. Anne moment for him when he prayed to St. Anne during the storm. He had another experience that night. He read this passage, or something very much like it, in Hosea, and then he found it again in Romans. Since all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God, they are now justified by his grace as a gift through the redemption that is in Christ Jesus. You see, Luther had this idea that you had to do certain works or buy certain things to earn God's love and grace and salvation. But here in Paul's letter to the Romans, and really throughout the Bible, we're told that God's love and mercy and justice and peace is not something that can be earned, because we are imperfect people. That's who we are. But it's God who does it. It's God who says, I love you. I want you to have my love and my grace and my mercy. And so God gives it to us for free. And God does that through Jesus, his work on the cross and the empty tomb on Easter morning. It's a free gift that can't be earned. And this changed Luther's life. From this point on, Luther, again, as I mentioned earlier, fanned the flames of the Reformation. And so this idea that God's love is free and for all people took off. And the church wasn't too happy about it. So, we'll learn more about Luther next week when we talk about this idea of grace. In the coming videos, for the rest of our lesson, we're going to have a YouTube video about geographical locations of Luther's life, but we'll also have one more about why someone is a Lutheran. So, we'll see you later.
Hi, my name is Sandy Moser, and I'm a Lutheran in part because I grew up here at Trinity Lutheran Church. But when I was in confirmation, we learned about some different denominations and different religions around the world, and I decided that my belief system still coincided with the Lutheran theology. And when I was in college and when I became a mother and as I got older, I would reevaluate, and I always have come back to the belief system that the Lutheran Church and especially the ELCA agrees with.
Hi, Compass Youth. It's Ashley. I am going to challenge Pastor Tom on Martin Luther. I have come up with a bunch of quotes, and I'm going to test Pastor Tom's knowledge on whether it was something that Martin Luther said or not. So we are going to play, Did Martin Luther Say It? And don't worry, there's really fun consequences.
I want to say that I'm really nervous, and I have no idea what Ashley's going to do. Like, literally, I was recording everything, and she came up with this, so.
I did. Okay, it'll be okay. You'll be fine. Pastor Tom, did Martin Luther say it? I cannot and will not recant anything, for to go against conscience is neither right nor safe.
Luther said it!
Correct! Number 2. Did Martin Luther say it? Reason is the enemy of faith.
No?
Martin Luther said it!
I know what's going to happen. I know what's going to happen.
The consequence is you have to stand over there, you have to run and do your very best leap.
Oh, like a ballet leap?
Correct.
leap across. Oh boy, here we go. Oh!
Excellent!
Ah,
Okay, number 3.
wasn't so bad. Okay.
Okay, number 3. If we have no peace, it is because we have forgotten that we belong to each other.
That sounds too common day. I'm gonna say no.
No. Do you know who said it?
Nelson Mandela?
Good try. Mother Teresa.
Ah. All right.
Okay, number 4. Everything that is done in the world is done by hope. That's why I love the Google.
It sounds like something Luther would say.
But did Martin Luther say it?
Yes.
Yes!
Here, high five.
Safe. Okay, number 5. You have to get some more wrong.
No.
People don't realize how a man's whole life can be changed by one book.
No.
Who said it?
Pastor Patrick.
Oh, Malcolm X. I thought I was going to trick you on that one. Okay, get some more wrong.
Hey, this is why I'm a Luther nerd, all right?
Good. Okay. Even if I knew that tomorrow the world would go to pieces, I would still plant my apple tree.
Yep, Luther said it. You know why? Because my pastor in confirmation, that was his favorite line. Yeah.
Guys, we need them to be better. Worse at this. Better. It's not even a word. Okay, ready? We have 2 left. For there is no one so great or mighty that they can avoid the misery that will rise up against them when they resist and strive against God. Did Martin Luther say it?
I'm so stupid. I wish I could do a poll on Zoom.
You cannot call a friend.
Yes.
No! Martin Luther did not say it. It was another reformer, though, John Calvin. So, what you need to do is you need to... Okay, what should we do? I have so many good ones. Pastor Tom, you have to walk up right here and you have to instruct them on the best method for ice fishing, and you have to demonstrate it. So you have to act out ice fishing since it's his favorite.
All right, so here you go. First, I like the pistol grip. So you're gonna hold your rod like this, and you just jig it. Just little flick, and then you just a little action here. Bring it up, tempt that walleye down, and flick. There you go. Boom. Hey, we only got like 30 seconds. Here we go.
Okay, last one. Ready? Did Martin Luther say it? You are not only responsible for what you say, but also for what you do not say. Did Martin Luther say it?
No.
Yes, he did! Okay, really fast, Pastor Tom. You need to rock or stand over there and attempt to do a cartwheel. Ready, set, go! Love it! Woo! Hello, Pastor Tom. Thanks for joining. Did Martin